edition of A Seat at the Table, where you have access to those intellectuals who are definitely providing access to you all so that equity, inclusion are part of the conversation, how we get there, what systems. Tonight, I have the opportunity to bring to you two of the best thinkers in this space. Obviously, we'll start with the most beautiful, intelligent, and beautiful, radiant smile this evening, Miss Harrison. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Very excited to be here.
Great, Elizabeth. It's always good to see you. And then, of course, the entrepreneur extraordinaire, Jeffrey Bowman. How are you this evening?
Amazing, amazing. Looking
Welcome.
forward to a great conversation.
Yeah, welcome you both to A Seat at the Table here on Rolling Out. When you decided to write this book, and for those who don't know, obviously we'll get a copy pulled up for you, but the thinking was advanced. You were attacked at locations for having the type thought that should be measured, data points to give inclusion and actually details on how we could actually get diversity and inclusion, reframing this marketplace and being able to use data points. That's something that you do to address the total market approach, reaching a new majority. I guess you'll define that new majority, and obviously it will help corporate America connect, but it'll also make them accountable. I think that's the beauty in what you've always had and definitely promoted the accountability of corporate America through this process. How'd you come up with this? And why don't you lead us off and then we'll get to Miss Harrison.
Yeah, no, Munson, thank you for having us and rolling out. Been a big fan for over 20 years now. So the thing I'll say that it took us about 30 years to get here. And what I mean by that, I started this book because I, like many others of Gen X, we're generation 2, maybe generation 3 post-civil rights. We had the fortunate opportunities of going to amazing integrated elementary schools, junior high schools, and high schools. And then when we got to college, a lot of us were bused to companies, whether it be through a diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative, but I got my start at Pepsi. It was a summer internship program. And when you think about that, that was the beginning of what a lot of folks in the 60s had fought for. We were Gen 2. And when I began to get considered for opportunities to go back to business school, went to Clark Atlanta University, after 4 years at Pepsi, matriculated through the management trainee program, became a district and territory development manager. And it was actually at P&G. I was in a room. I was the only one. Didn't have dinner table conversations about brand management. Read about it, but never lived it. And so as a result of that, I saw people walk into the room that carried these oversized briefcases that had creative. And I said, wow, people get paid for their ideas. And that was really the start of my journey in terms of curiosity. And so while at P&G, trying to read up as to how Black folks make it in corporate America, I came across a book that had not been written or had been written in the 80s, early 80s, and they were Gen 1 post-civil rights. And it was a how-to guide as to how to make it in corporate America. And it was right then at that point that I said, hey, how do I get more content to help others like myself navigate? And so from then on, I went on to Miller Brew & Company, Whirlpool, Dell, and Sears. And I got the opportunity when I went to Ogilvy with the question, if David Ogilvy were here, what would the agency look like? And it was really a question of, because now we're in this, it was Obama, post-racial, all the different things that people were talking about at that particular time. And so we really didn't have a guidebook as to how companies prepare for this idea of the new majority or the new America. And it was on that journey that I began to understand what companies at that particular time in the mid 60s were considering how to prepare for the upward and mobile Black employees, Black middle class consumers. And that was really the germination of the book. And so when you think about the next iteration, I wanted to move the conversation beyond the practice of diversity, equity, and inclusion, which was about integration, because America was going from segregated to integrated. And I want to go beyond and modernize the practice of multicultural marketing. Notice I didn't say multiculturalism. Notice I didn't say DNI. I specifically wanted to innovate around the practice that many corporations use day in, day out when they want to drive change within their organization. And that's how we got here. And wrote the book based on those experiences that I had, built an operating system for change, validated. 5 years later, we think we got the answer as to how to solve for this decades-old problem.
And then we come up with the marketplace and the total market approach to reaching the new.
Yeah. I think when you think about the idea, and I'll reflect a little bit back to what I was talking about before. When we got the question, if David Ogilvy were here, what would the agency look like? It was really about a question about, in 1966, McKinsey had written a white paper. And in the white paper, it was about how CEOs prepared for Gen 1 post-civil rights. And in that paper, they talked about the total market. Now, imagine you being a CEO when you've just watched Malcolm, Martin, Kennedy, all these assassinations, going into Vietnam War, riots happening across every major city. You had to say to yourself, do I really want a total market, or do I want an ethnic focus approach? And that ethnic focus approach became a doubling down, a focus on practices specifically for at that particular time. Think about the census for Black people. And then the 1970 census added Hispanics, and 1980 census predicted Hispanics were going to outnumber Blacks. So then you think about the true essence of what multiculturalism became. But the practice stayed the same. At that particular time, Black people were less than 8% of the US population. Now, when you combine all of the different ethnic groups, it's 40%, but only 6% of what is now a $480 billion industry goes towards Black, Hispanic, and Asian spending.
What you say about that, Elizabeth?
I think it's terrible. And it's actually, it's interesting because I met Jeffrey. My journey is a little bit different. I actually grew up in New York City in the 80s, late 70s. And when I started, I went to Sarah Lawrence, grew up with, lots of privilege, went to Sarah Lawrence College, started a PR company with no money, a good Rolodex in those days, right? A lot of connections. And I was telling Jeffrey.
Rolodex.
A Rolodex. I know. Do people even know what that is anymore? But that's what I had. I had a Rolodex, a lot of connections. And when I started, I call myself a 22-year-old startup business, right? Because we actually are reinventing the company as we speak. But when I started back in the day, and it was the time of doing Puffy's White Party out in the Hamptons. It was a time of working with Russell Simmons and working with Kimora on launching her jewelry line and her accessory line. And we were frankly, mostly white, majority white, young, Jewish, white girls who grew up in New York, or a lot of them from the South. And our approach was very by the book. We did parties, we were event planners. I mean, my business now has really changed and transformed. Why I went and created this business with Jeffrey and joined him on Reframe was I had an epiphany about 5 years ago. So before Black Lives Matter really exploded on the scene, where I looked around at the people who worked for me and my clients, frankly, right? I was looking at the CEOs and the CMOs that I was working with, and everybody pretty much looked the same. And at that time, I was working with Bacardi. They've been my client for over 15 years. They're an amazing client. And we had been working on the vodka business, which was Grey Goose. And all of a sudden they said, you know what, we really want you to work on Bacardi, on the rum business. And at that time, the rum business was really, the majority of the target was Latin. And what was interesting was when I looked around the room and I looked at the people working on the business, there was not one person representative of the target. So I sat back and I literally transformed the whole agency to where now we're over 40% diverse. So that's everything from, Black, Asian, Latin, and it's not only, actually, it's not only in color and race, it's in everything. It's diversity of thought. It's where people come from. It's what schools they went to or didn't go through. And when Black Lives Matter, so Bacardi, we sat in a room one day and I remember it was a defining moment for me. It was an IAT meeting, which meant there was the advertising agency, the media buying agency, the PR agency, the client, the brand people. And we were talking about art. And we were talking about doing a partnership with Swizz Beatz, who we became partners with on No Commission, which is a great platform. And there were people in that room who said, well, I don't really know if the target gets art. Like, I don't know if that's really, are they going to understand that? Is that going to be something that's going to be relevant? And and the people on my team looked at me and I looked at them and we were all like, okay, something's really got to change here. And it was actually an aha moment for me. And it made me wake up to the fact that I wanted to help transform my own culture, but also my clients' cultures into a better place to work and to be. And so Jeffrey was introduced to me by a woman named Veronica Rodriguez, who works for me, who worked for Jeffrey for several years. And we had put together this culture council and we were sort of thinking that we were going to do this on our own. And she said, Jeffrey spent the better part of his career building this incredible company with this incredible ethos and messaging. And she and I actually got into it because I said, why don't we start a multicultural division of our agency? And she said, no, I will not do that. And I said, well, why not? And she said, because that means we will be walking into this much of the budget as opposed to the total budget. And she said, and we're not going to do that. That's old fashioned. And I'm not going to put my name on that. And she introduced me to Jeffrey. And I spent a lot of time with Jeffrey really learning about Reframe. And now we've been on a lot of business pitches together and we've been into lots of different companies and we've talked about Reframe and our partnership. And I think, it's super relevant right now. And it's exciting. And what we bring to the table is kind of the executional piece of it, right? Because we do experiential, we do marketing, and we do messaging and PR. So my job right now is to really get the messaging out, talking to you, being in Forbes, having an article that ran in Provoke Media. And then once we start working with companies, really helping them execute internally in their companies, helping them really get the messaging out, and then externally to their consumers.
So Jeff, how does this Reframe close that gap between corporate America and the reality?
So one of the things that we had to do to really reshape this conversation, we had to redefine the business problem. When you think about diversity, equity, inclusion, multiculturalism, a lot of it is race and identity based. And so when you think about Blacks, they only account for about 13% of the US population. But oftentimes in our business, Blacks as a group over-indexed as it relates to the impact of culture. And so our goal was then to define, well, how do we see the value associated with culture? So we redefined and restated the problem statement. The workplace is 2 to 3 generations culturally behind the marketplace. And so what does that mean? In the space of attitudes and behaviors as it relates to culture, social science is that defining organization. And so when we talk about culture, there are 5 stages of culture: monocultural, multi, which we've been in the space for more than 30 years. Now we enter the space of cross-cultural, polycultural, and transcultural. And so by restating the problem, we then are able to go in and diagnose attitudes and behaviors of where a company is at. on a scale of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And so for us, we do a cultural assessment. We look to see where they're at as relates to their score, as relates to the company structure, the company strategy, the systems, the segments in terms of whether it be employee or customers, solutions, and systems. And so when we go in and we do the assessment, then we're really able to pinpoint where the issues are and where those barriers are. And then we work through them with them as relates to software. We built software 2019, 2020 to help drive the best customer experience that are personal, no matter where they work and live. And so, it took us on this journey where we had to develop the operating system for change. 2015, 2018, 2019, we built a software to scale and sustain that change. And now we have combined both software and services for operationalizing change from the inside out or the outside in.
Well, Elizabeth, you look like you want to say something.
No, I mean, I was just thinking, it's a bit of a new world for me. Jeffrey and I have these conversations all the time, because
I would say so. I think your math's still kind of bad. You're at 40%. I think you probably want to go ahead and dial up. I mean, I wouldn't imagine, and I'm sure that makes people, particularly privileged people, more uncomfortable when you really understand that it's time out for having every position or being in the majority. I think that's a conversation. Somebody was talking about this administration and how they've doubled down on white and, bet all their chips on white. And I said, well, the table is only red and green. You can't win on no white spot. So, I mean, it doesn't even exist on the table. What are we talking about? He doubled it down on white. Where is that at? What game is that? I don't think that's roulette. But and anyway, I think it makes people nervous.
It does make
you nervous.
Yeah, it does. I mean, honestly, I think that I've done a lot of transforming of myself, right? I had to look at a lot of my unconscious biases, and I had to really look at them, not just say it, not just like be in a typical training and just be like, I read, a woman gave me White Fragility a couple of probably 2 years ago. And it's been a lot of talk about that book. And the thing is, I'm a big reader. I read a lot and I read fast. That book took me a month to get through because it was really hard for me to read it. And every time I was reading it, I was getting so defensive. Well, I'm not like that. And I have Black friends and I'm not racist. And
you have special Black friends.
I have special Black friends.
You got to remember, you have special Black friends.
I don't have enough
I don't know that you have Black friends yet. You have special Black friends. I don't know that you have Black friends. I've never seen you at a homecoming. So you got to remind your white friends, just as it, you might know one Black friend. That might be a guy I'm looking at, but most white people have special Black friends.
Well, I would acknowledge that I don't have enough Black
Russell
friends.
Simmons isn't a regular Black person.
Right. Well, he's a client. I know.
Or is not a regular Black person.
Yeah. Do you know Sean Dove?
Of course, they're not regular.
Yeah. Well, that was the world that, that's what
the Hamptons world.
Yeah. That's the world I was in, right? So it's been a really amazing transformation for me. And I still have a lot of work to do. And Jeffrey,
we all do. You're not alone. I was chiding one of my friends, just we all have to have these new lenses. You got to go get your eyes re-examined. I mean, everyone in the entire country has to reframe their thinking, right, Jeffrey?
That's right. And look, here's the thing. At the end of the day, we can't do this alone. And I think the partnership with Elizebeth and having honest conversations, because at the end of the day, we could not have been partners if we were not bringing our whole self. Yeah. And I think that's been the beauty of this partnership over the last, 2 months is, I think she knows I don't hide anything in terms of conversations. It's going into those meetings knowing where those biases are, and then her being able to call bullshit on the biases, and being able to overcome and really get to the true meaning of what is it that we're trying to impact from an organization. When you talk about inequity that's so disparate, and numbers indicate by the year 2040, the Black household will be negative as it relates to wealth, not positive, but negative. And so when we have these companies talking about Black Lives Matter, there has to be economic inclusion as well as social inclusion or social impact. And so we have a white paper coming out that talks about everything that we just talked about. It took us 10 years to validate it. We had a major industry association try to whitewash that conversation. And so we have a white paper coming out that talks about the whitewashing of the total market topic and why it matters to Black lives. I think what oftentimes is forgotten in this idea of saving Black America is that you have people that have businesses who want their business to be funded so they can hire and help the community. So there are different ways to do this other than a donation. How about fund, close that equity gap that exists within an industry that we care so much about, so that you have the next generation not having this conversation that we're currently having.
Come on, Elizabeth, come on with it.
This is I don't know, Jeffrey, you're gonna kill me, but I'm like the token white person in the room. So I always joke to Jeffrey.
Never that. I think we don't do tokenism over here.
Tokenism is bad.
I think when we're having conversation, the reality is for all of us, it's good to meet you. I think there are white and Black conversations or white strangers. You can now say that one more Black publisher that really does own a Black business that's in Atlanta, and we can definitely be associates, and I think we're part of a movement that we're all pushing for. So I don't believe in tokenism. I don't think Jeffrey would have a token partner.
No. You're right about that.
At that point, it's kind of counterintuitive.
Yes.
Then the person don't want to do the work. And people that want to be tokens typically don't want to change. They just kind of want to be present and kind of do that, siphon off the blood. One of my favorite movies is There Will Be Blood. And so, at some point, oppression will break. I think we've seen breaks. I think the unpredictability of this break should be a cautionary tale of how you really can't predict change moving forward. There are lots of things that were not anticipated, but it's only because people won't be open and have dialogue. So no tokenism. You're welcome here.
Thank you. I have two daughters. I have one who's a senior in college, and she's a young activist. And because of COVID, she was living at home, obviously, with me this last year. And every day I would wake up, and Charlotte, she is one of the most, she's to me the next generation of hope in a young woman, who absolutely sees color, because there's no such thing as not seeing color, but who embraces everybody regardless, and wants to go to Washington and do good. And every time I would write something, I would run it by Charlotte, because she was actually my eyes and ears to make sure that I was getting it right. So I have a lot of hope.
Do you know Tamika Mallory?
No.
Okay, so you should make a big donation to Tamika Mallory. She's right there in New York. It's nice, but I want you to meet some sisters. Maybe, Jeff, we could have that dialogue. This is a good thing, because you want to run. It's like in talking about this, I think that reframing the conversation is, even when you have a mechanism like Reframe, we want people to not believe we want them to do the work. We actually need Jeffrey doing the work because his lens is going to be the most honest. If you have, and I love that your daughter is an activist, but I do want her to have a lens that is honest and true. And it's very dishonest when you wake up in privilege to imagine that you're going to have a truth moment when hunger, broadband, working from home are not a consideration. They're a permanent reality. So I think that as we grow, and I appreciate you, there are individuals that you can follow, and we all connect, and then you connect me. So I'm not hooking you up with Tamika so you don't hook me up to anybody. So but we all bridge, we all bridge what it is now, But my point is, even that, you don't want to necessarily run a litmus test on activism against somebody who at any given day can pull back. See, I can't pull back my blackness.
Yeah.
No matter how they pull me over, they're gonna always see my color first. And that in all our activism, we have to live in that truth.
Yeah.
And
I
that's
would be the first to agree with you on that. We sponsor a class from the South Bronx through Pencil, which is a really great organization. They have something called Principle for a Day. And to your point about really being affected, we basically lost our whole class. They couldn't find them. Most of them had parents or grandparents who died of COVID. They had no access to laptops. And it was they would come to our office every other week, and we were building projects together, and we were doing all kinds of great work. And it's been devastating. And we've been trying to reach out and trying to find ways to support them. But I absolutely hear you about what you're saying, and I agree.
Well, I look forward to your next call with me so we can make some introductions. And
that would be great.
I think, and it's just amazing. You listen to some historic moments. The Black and Jewish community were a lot closer in the movements before. And I think economics have kind of created some polarization inside of our community. So, but Tamika's right there in New York. I mean, you've got to.
We'll make sure. We'll make sure that
she'll be
that
a ride
happens.
too. She's coming to ride. She'll be on my show Wednesday, actually.
Okay.
You have a great city. But
and that's one of the reasons I think. Look, Elizebeth has definitely stepped up. We want to amplify this partnership. And coming back with you, Munson, and rolling out as a starting point.
Yeah.
And we've all been in this fight, but I think more importantly is how do we lead with innovation? And from the very beginning when we started this total market topic, there was new language, and even within our own community,
like the same language, Jeff. I total market. Outside of that, eliminated more Black agencies, killed more Black ideas, redlined Black anything that wasn't led by anybody else. I think the beauty of your conversation is it measures what people are doing and puts leadership in place.
Yeah.
Who should read this book, though? What CEOs, what C-suite, what group should really be getting this thought leadership, because this is a thought leadership piece.
Yeah, look, I want to backtrack on a couple of things, because I think the air needs to be cleared up. So when we talk about a topic killing a segment of what was already a small segment, I think that's given it a little bit more. I'd love to take that credit, but I don't think you were
that person.
But I want to use this format to bring clarity. When you talk about Black-owned agencies in the 70s and 80s, that was pretty much the starting point of when America began to be more ethnic, because you have the ethnic population growing. And so when you look at the history of the space, 2000, there were more agencies that closed shop between 1990 and 2000, and probably, the history of Black agencies, because of consolidation, digitalization. And so when you bring in this notion of total market, I think there was a lot of fear, even within our own communities, about change. And what was driving that change had more to do with digitalization than a topic. A lot of our agencies of color were going in to CMOs and asking for television, radio, out of home, and print. Those budgets were drying up just like they were drying up for general market. So a lot of our agencies did not make the transition. And I say that to say, we really got to hold brands accountable for really investing in those vendors like us that can bring that value. And so that's the thing that I want to be careful with about this topic, is that sometimes we'll point a finger at the wrong thing. And as a community, as we're talking about social impact, we need to talk about economic impact. Hold those brands accountable who hired those agencies. And so that's the only thing I'll speak to that, because that story is still there. Brands are still alive every day. And the inequity is with the people that write the check. Those are the people that write the check. It's a real easy target to go and seek why we can't solve for this problem. So that's my only thing as it relates to economic inclusion. This book was written for the next generation of marketers that's coming up, number one. Number two, this book was written for, I think there are over 10,000 Fortune 1000 companies. And when you look at those companies, they, employ essentially, more than half of the population. And so when you look at the spin that it impacts, it's over, 600 billion globally. So for CEOs, CMOs, and everyone that works under their organizations, they're struggling right now. They're asking themselves, well, how do I change? Well, you can't change by doing investments in general market and multicultural. You have to change by investing in innovative thinking as it relates to cross-culturalism and polyculturalism. Those are digitally enabled insights that allow marketers to reach their consumers in a much more effective way. And the reason that we have to innovate ourselves out of this idea of general market and multicultural is because if we stay in multicultural as a practice, they're going to redline budgets annually to where we're only getting 6% at best of the whatever $100 million, even though our culture has a much bigger impact. And so we have to be better at articulating what our value is and holding these same brands accountable for how much they're investing in our communities, not just social activism.
Anything in closing, Elizabeth?
Yeah, I wanted to just sort of echo that, because I've seen it on calls that we've been on with some big brands where we just sort of, the way that even I've been able to get some of these calls and meetings with clients that I know is if I say I'm going through the DE&I door, and I hate to do that because I don't think that's what we're about. I mean, I think it's a part of what we're talking about, but to Jeffrey's point, it's not the whole point. And I hope that not in the not too near future, we won't have to do that. We'll just be able to go in and say, listen, we're here to help you transform your business and your culture to be more inclusive regardless. So I think just in closing that I would echo what Jeffrey is saying. And I would say that, I am really hungry to meet more people. Introduce me to everybody and anybody that you want to, and I will do the same. I promise. I'm a connector. That's what PR people do. And I'm really, I'm excited for what's going to come. I think we're in for a tough year. I think we're still, at least in my business, and I'm sure most others, we're still in recovery mode. We're still trying to find our feet. I think this election is going to be very, I don't even know what the word for it is. I mean, I think it's going to make everything that much more heightened. I think the rest of the year is going to be super painful. And if there's anything that, Jeffrey and I can do together to make it easier or help companies to navigate through it, I'm excited and proud to do that work.
Well, that's exciting. Elizabeth, very nice to meet you. Jeffrey, just a last closeout on this book. If you start with the title of the book and what it really means to this community and why people should pick it up today.
Yeah, the book is called Reframe the Marketplace. It's a total market approach to reaching the new majority. It is published by Wiley. It is a how-to book for how companies accelerate growth by changing from the inside out. It has tried and true frameworks and steps for organizations of any size. You can buy the book at www.jefferylbowman.com. You can go to any of the platforms that sell books. And, I think it's just a good opportunity for people that make decisions as people leaders for their employees as to how they shift and change, and giving them the actual tools to do that. And look forward to continuing the conversation. As we know, this has been an ongoing conversation now for more than 6 decades. And so we think because of the great experiences we've had, we can now look at this as a much more holistic and innovative way to solving, eradicating a problem within corporate America specifically.
Well, I like that. I like that you brought Elizebeth along. We're gonna give her some new points, new friends, and I really appreciate that. And
I think
definitely
it started Black Lives Matter, though. It's kind of like the name is like resonating with me now of who she is. But I haven't met her personally, so I would love to. Sorry to cut you off.
we're not having no serious conversation. You didn't cut me off. Your brother was fine. I'm good over here. You're the only guest I invite to my house. What are you talking about? I'm not inviting anybody in, Elizebeth, at all. So welcome to my home.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming to hang out with me. I really think that Reframe is important because for many people, they're reading activities books and ideas like anti-racist. And I don't want them to miss the business case on how we should address racism. So for all of those who want to pick up books to understand how to be insightful and create a real practice, Reframe allows that approach in a measurable, systematic way for everyone to understand what the new America is really going to look like and how we can approach this new majority, which I think is really key. And it frightens people still, even saying the new majority. I think it's a very uncomfortable reality, but I do caution people. I said, well, don't forget, 100 years later, they might ask for some more reparations and double down. They won't keep asking permission forever. So keep on, because I think history is recording things beyond people's imaginations. And I think the young people for sure are taking notice on how quick or long or slow people are at approaching change. I'd like to thank you both for coming to a seat at the table. Elizebeth, welcome. You're always welcome here. Jeffrey, let's get back. I'd love to see a couple of CMOs to just kind of talk about how we dissect the approach, utilizing your methodology. All right?
Happy to do. And thank you for having us, Munson. Appreciate
very much.
The platform.
Great to meet you. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
For all of you out there looking to reframe your conversation or your thinking, be sure to take a good look at how this marketplace, how to help close the gap between corporate America and the new majority. I'm Munson Steed. Thank you for tuning in for A Seat at the Table here, rolling out. Good night, everybody.